Penguin Random House Audio presents The Black Cabinet, the untold story of African Americans and politics during the age of Roosevelt, by Jill Watts. Read for you by Bahni Turpin. Note to reader. Some of the language in this book was and is offensive. It is quoted here from the original sources to offer insight into historical realities that African Americans of the era faced and to illuminate the struggles of Black cabinet members in their fight for equality. Prologue. In the middle of January 1940, Mary McLeod Bethune awoke early in her Washington, D.C. home. A dry wheezing, punctuated by a breathless cough, often stirred her, and she would rise sometimes well before dawn. She grabbed the doctor's latest remedy, then made her way to the kitchen for a hot cup of tea. For much of her life she had suffered asthma attacks, and this winter they seemed worse. And now, at 64, she was also plagued by arthritis and had to use a cane to get about. Yet she refused to be stilled and seemed to possess a reserve of boundless energy. Her life had been filled with hard work, and no matter what obstacle she faced, she would not, could not rest. Born in Maysville, South Carolina in 1875, Mary McLeod Bethune was the daughter of parents who had both endured slavery. Freed after the Civil War, her family sharecropped for a time, and as a youth, Bethune had worked alongside her mother, father, and siblings in cotton fields and cold, swampy rice paddies. But she hungered for a better life. She fought for an education, received a scholarship, and left home. During summer breaks to help pay for her schooling, Bethune took jobs as a cook and a maid in white homes. Drive and industry, and she insisted faith and prayer, brought her out of poverty and took her to the heights of success. By the 1930s, Bethune had become one of the African American community's most revered figures. She was the founder of Bethune-Cookman College, a driving force in the Black women's club movement, and a celebrated civil rights activist. In 1936, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt personally offered her a position in the New Deal. His administration's massive collection of federal agencies and programs aimed at healing America's Great Depression, the most serious economic crisis in the nation's history. Mary McLeod Bethune accepted an appointment to head up a work program for African American youth, and with that, she became the first African American woman to lead a federal division. Almost immediately after settling into her new post, Bethune took command of an informal group of Black federal employees known as FDR's Black Cabinet. Before her arrival, they had, for the most part, operated independently in their various programs, fighting for equal inclusion for African Americans in the New Deal. From diverse backgrounds, the group's members were often divided by internal rivalries and personal conflicts. But with a single-minded determination, Bethune began to channel their individual campaigns against discrimination and transform them into an unofficial lobby for African American concerns. She was both irrepressible and irresistible. In personal encounters, she radiated a winning charm. In front of audiences, she possessed a spellbinding charisma. African Americans of the era would celebrate Mary McLeod Bethune as the First Lady of our Negro nation. What she had achieved was not lost on her. "I know what it is to yearn for a chance to do something, to be something better," she remarked in one interview. "When I was very young, I resolved to lift myself, somehow, out of the confusion and misery of those post-Civil War days, and in lifting myself, I found a higher motive, that of lifting others." By winter 1940, She had been battling for African American equality in the federal government for almost 6 years, and she continued to drive hard. Much was at stake. The Great Depression had gripped the nation for more than a decade. Although the economy had begun to turn around, homelessness and poverty persisted in parts of the nation. Hitler and Nazism had moved throughout Europe, and on the other side of the world, tensions had grown with Japan. While these threats loomed large over the nation, much of the African American community remained destitute. In 1933, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt first took office, unemployment in many African American communities ran at 50% or higher, twice the national average. Of the nearly 12 million African Americans living in the United States counted in the 1930 census, who composed almost 10% of the entire population, 73% lived in the rural South and faced dire poverty and the threat of starvation. The vast majority of Black Southerners were denied the right to vote. Overall, the outlook for African American citizens during the Great Depression was grave. Segregated in communities across the country, subjected to racial violence, and denied equal access to education, social and legal justice, health care, and jobs, many African Americans, rather than recovering by 1940, continued to fall desperately further and further behind. Black people and their sufferings were never far from Bethune's mind. She believed that she had been brought into the world with a special purpose, and that was to end the brutalities against the African American people and lead them to equality. Deeply devout, she began every morning in prayer. These cold January winter mornings were no different. By the second week of the month, rain had turned to snow, and then to rain again. Bethune's doctors had cautioned her to slow down, but she refused. New anti-lynching legislation, known as the Gavigan Bill, named for its sponsor, New York Congressman Joseph A. Gavigan, was making its way through the House of Representatives. Bethune steeled herself for the fight to get it passed. Since emancipation and the end of the Civil War in 1865, lynching as a means to terrorize the Black population had become a public ritual, especially below the Mason-Dixon line that historically designated the geographic division between North and South. Unchecked by local and state authorities, white mobs took the law into their own hands and tortured, mutilated, and killed Black men, women, and children. Lynch mobs were brazen. White crowds posed for photographs, arrogantly grinning and laughing as Black bodies were hung from trees, were riddled to shreds by bullets, were stabbed, and were set on fire. No Black family in the South was immune from the horrors. According to one study, between 1882 and 1940, more than 3,000 African Americans had been lynched in the United States. And that figure did not take into account the numerous murders and mob slayings of Black citizens that had gone unreported. Bethune carried with her a childhood memory of Gus, a family acquaintance who, in the streets of Maysville, had refused to obey a white man's demand he blow out a lit match. When ordered a second time, Gus threw a punch and leveled that white man. A white crowd began to circle around Gus. Someone yelled, "String him up!" Bethune remembered her father grabbing her, hustling her away, and commanding, "Don't look backward." When they arrived home, her mother immediately sent her to bed. But she never forgot the haunting voices and angry shouts of the white mob. She had nothing against white people. The shock and fear had long passed, she explained later, but her loathing of the brutal injustice had not. When the Gavigan anti-lynching bill reached the House floor, Bethune summoned 3 core members of the Black cabinet to join her in the gallery to observe as Congress debated it. They were all young men of professional
Sample complete. Ready to continue?